Our second state after death is called a state of our deeper interests, because then we are given access to the deeper reaches of our minds, or of our intentions and thoughts, while the more outward interests that engaged us in the first state become dormant. Anyone who is observant of our life and our words and actions can recognize that we all have more outward and more inward natures, or more outward and more inward thoughts and intentions. We can recognize this from the fact that if we are involved in civic life, we think about other people in terms of their reputation or of what we have picked up about them when they were the subjects of conversation. However, we do not talk with them the way we think about them, and even if the others are evil people, we still behave courteously toward them. This is particularly noticeable in pretenders and sycophants, whose words and deeds are wholly at odds with their thoughts and intentions, and in hypocrites who talk about God, heaven, the salvation of souls, the truths of the church, the welfare of the country, and their neighbor as though they were motivated by faith and love when at heart they believe otherwise and love no one but themselves. We may gather from this that we have two thought processes, one more outward and one more inward, and that we talk on the basis of our more outward thinking and feel differently on the basis of our more inward thinking. Further, these two thought processes have been separated to prevent the inner from flowing into the outer and becoming somehow visible. We have been so created that our inner thought may act in unison with our outer by means of correspondence, and it does act as one when we are involved in something constructive, since we do not think anything that is not good and what we say is good. But if we are involved in something evil, our deeper thought does not act as one with our outer thought, because we are thinking something evil and saying something good. This means that the pattern is inverted, since the good is on the outside for us and the evil lies within. As a result, the evil controls the good and suppresses it like a slave, to make it serve as a means to securing its own ends, the objects of its love. Since this kind of purpose is latent in the good we say and do, we can see that now the good is not really good, but is infected with evil, no matter how good it may look in outward form to people who are not aware of deeper matters. It is different for people who are involved in something good. For them, the pattern is not inverted. Rather, the good flows from their deeper thought into their more outward thought and therefore into their words and deeds. This is the pattern into which we were created. In this way, our deeper reaches are in heaven and in the light there. And since heaven's light is divine truth emanating from the Lord and is in fact the Lord in heaven, the Lord is leading us. I mention this to show that each of us has a more inward thought and a more outward thought, and that these are distinguishable. When I say thought, I mean volition as well, since thought comes from volition. No one can actually think without intent. We can see from this what our states of outer concerns and of inner concerns are. When I speak of volition and thought, volition means affection and love, as well as every delight and pleasure that derives from affection and love, since these go back to volition as their basis. Whatever we intend, we love, and it feels delightful and pleasant to us. And in turn, whatever we love and find pleasant and delightful, we intend. Thought, though, also means everything we use to support our affection or love, for thought is nothing but the form of our intention, or the means by which what we intend comes to light. This form is constructed by various rational analyses that have their source in the spiritual world and are integral functions of our spirit. We need to know that our basic quality is determined entirely by the quality of our inner natures, not by what we are like outwardly apart from that inner nature. This is because our inner reaches are our spirit, and since it is from the spirit that the body lives, our life is the life of our spirit. Consequently, whatever we are like in our inward natures, that is what we are like to eternity, Since our more outward natures belong to the body, they are separated after death, and any elements of them that cling to the spirit become dormant, serving only as a plane for deeper concerns, as I explained above, in describing the memory that we retain after death. We can see from this what really belongs to us and what does not. For evil people, the contents of the outer thought that gives rise to their words and the outer intent that gives rise to their actions do not really belong to them. What belongs to them is the contents of their deeper thought and intentions. Once the first state has been completed, the state of more outward concerns described in the preceding chapter, we as spirits are brought into the state of our deeper concerns, or into the state of those deeper intentions and consequent thoughts in which we engaged in this world when we were left to ourselves and our thinking was free and unfettered. We slip into this second state without realizing it, much as we did in the world when we draw the thought nearest to our speech, the immediate source of our speech, back toward our inner thought, and let it pause there a while. So when we as spirits are in this state, we are being ourselves and living our real life, since thinking freely from our own affection is our very life and our very self. Spirits in this state think from their own intent, and therefore from their own affection or love, and then their thought forms a unity with their intention, such a unity that they scarcely seem to be thinking, only intending. It is almost the same when they talk, except that there is some fear that the thoughts of their intention might appear naked, since their civic life in the world had planted this fear in their intention. All of us, without exception, are brought into this state after death, because it is the proper state of our spirits. The earlier state was characteristic of our spirit when we were in public, and that is not its very own state. As for the latter state, which is the state of the outer concerns that we find ourselves in immediately after death, as described in the previous chapter, there are many reasons to conclude that it is not the proper state of our spirits. For example, spirits not only think, but even talk from their own affection, since that is the source of their language, as is implied in what was presented in the chapter on the language of angels. We thought the same way in the world when we were turned inward, because at such times we did not think on the basis of words that we physically uttered, but simply visualized things, and could think more things in a minute than we could say in half an hour. We can also see that this state of relatively outward concerns is not the proper state of ourselves or our spirits, from the fact that when we are in the company of others in the world, we keep what we say in line with the laws of moral and civic life. Then our deeper thinking restrains our outer thinking the way one person restrains another, to make sure that the other does not cross the bounds of propriety and decency. It is also evidenced by the fact that when we do think privately, we think about what we will say and do in order to please people and to gain friendship, goodwill, and gratitude by devious means, that is differently than if we were acting from our actual intent. We can see from all this that the state of more inward concerns that spirits are led into is their proper state, which means that it was also the proper state of the individuals when they were living in the world. Scene 2. Behavior in accord with nature. When spirits are in this state of their deeper concerns, then it is obvious what kind of people they really were in the world. They actually behave in accord with their own nature. People who were inwardly devoted to the good in the world then behave sanely and wisely, more wisely than when they were living in the world. In fact, because they have been freed from any connection with the body, and therefore with the earthly things that darken and cover with a kind of cloud. In contrast, people who were focused on evil in the world then behave foolishly and insanely, more insanely than when they were in the world, in fact, because they are in freedom and are no longer constrained. As long as they were living in the world, they were outwardly sensible, because this was how they imitated rational people. So when the outer layers are stripped off, their inner insanity is unveiled. An evil person who outwardly pretends to be good can be compared to a brightly polished jar with a cover, with all kinds of filth hidden inside, just as the Lord said, "You are like whitewashed sepulchres that look lovely on the outside, but are inwardly full of the bones of the dead and all uncleanness." Matthew 23:27. All the people who have lived lives in the world focused on what is good and have acted in accord with their consciences, that is, people who have acknowledged the divine being and loved divine truths, and especially people who have applied them to their lives, seem to themselves to have awakened from sleep when they are let into this state of their more inward concerns, like people who have come from darkness into light. They are actually thinking from heaven's light and therefore from a deeper wisdom. And they are acting from what is good and therefore from a deeper affection. Heaven is flowing into their thoughts and affections with a profound feeling of blessedness and pleasure that they have never known before. This is because they are in touch with heaven's angels. Then, too, they acknowledge the Lord and worship Him with their very lives, because they are engaged in their own lives when they are in this state of more inward concerns. They are also acknowledging and worshiping Him in freedom, since freedom is a matter of our deeper affection. In this way, they move away from an outward holiness and into the inner holiness that is the essence of real worship. This is the state of people who have lived a Christian life in accordance with the precepts of the Word. Quite the opposite, though, is the state of people who in the world lived lives focused on evil, who had no conscience and therefore denied the divine being. For all the people who live in evil deny the divine being inwardly, no matter how convinced they are outwardly that they are not denying but acknowledging. This is because acknowledging the divine being and living in evil are opposites. When people like this come into the state of their deeper concerns in the other life, they seem foolish when people hear them talk or see them act, because their evil impulses impel them to break out into wicked deeds, into contempt for others, into derision and blasphemy, hatred and vengefulness. They cook up plots, some of them with such ingenuity and malice that you would scarcely believe anything like this existed in any human being. They are then free to act in accord with the thoughts of their intentions, because they are separated from the more outward factors that constrain them in the world. In short, they lose their rationality, because in the world their rationality did not dwell in their deeper natures, but in their outer ones. Still, they seem to themselves to be wiser than anyone else. Once people like this are in the second state, they are let back into the state of their more outward concerns for brief periods of time. They then retain a memory of how they behaved when they were in the state of their more inward concerns. Some of them are embarrassed and admit that they were insane. Some of them are not embarrassed at all. Some of them resent the fact that they are not allowed to be in the state of their more outward concerns all the time. But they are shown what they would be like if they were constantly in this state. They would be constantly trying to do the same things covertly, misleading people of simple heart and faith with simulations of goodness, honesty, and fairness. They would destroy themselves completely, because eventually their outer natures would be ablaze with the same fire as their inner natures, and this would consume their whole life. When spirits are in this second state, they actually look exactly the way they were inwardly in the world. The things they had done and said in secret are made public too, because now, since outward factors are not restraining them, they say the same things openly. And they keep trying to do the same things without any of the fear for the reputations that they had in the world. Further, they are then led into many states of their evils, so that they look to angels and good spirits like the people they really are. Nothing is hidden that will not be disclosed, or concealed that will not be recognized. What you have said in darkness will be heard in the light, and what you have spoken in the ear in closets will be proclaimed on the rooftops. Luke 12:2-3. And again I tell you, every idle word people have spoken, they will give an account of it on the day of judgment. Matthew 12:36. There is no way to describe briefly what evil people are like in this state because their insanity depends on their urges, and these vary. So I should like to mention just a few particular cases that will enable you to draw conclusions about the rest. Some people have loved themselves above all else. They have focused on their own prestige in their duties and positions. They have done constructive things not for the sake of doing them or from finding pleasure in them, but for the sake of their reputation, to be ranked above other people on that account, therefore finding pleasure in their reputation for eminence. When they arrive in the second state, they are supremely stupid, because the more they love themselves, the farther they move from heaven, and the farther they move from heaven, the farther they move from wisdom. There are people caught up in self-love and in guile at the same time, people who have used devious means to raise themselves to positions of esteem. They take up company with the worst people of all and study magical arts that are abuses of the divine design, using them to harass everyone who does not defer to them. They hatch plots, cherish hatred, breathe out vengeance, and long to savage everyone who does not submit to them. They plunge into all these behaviors to the extent that the malevolent horde supports them. Eventually, they start mulling over how they can climb up to heaven and destroy it, or how they can be worshipped there as gods. Their madness carries them all the way to this. Catholics like this are more insane than others. They cherish the thought that heaven and hell are in their power and that they can forgive sins at will. They claim everything divine for themselves and call themselves Christ. Their belief that this is true is so strong that wherever it flows in, it disturbs minds and brings on a darkness to the point of pain. They are much the same in both states, though in the second they lack rationality. There are people who have attributed creation to nature and have therefore denied the divine being at heart, though not out loud, thus denying everything about the church and heaven. They gather with people like themselves in this state and call everyone God who is particularly guileful, even honoring such individuals with divine worship. I have seen people like this in a meeting worshiping a magician, discussing nature, and behaving like idiots, as though they were animals in human form. You may gather from these few cases what people are like whose deeper levels of mind are close toward heaven. This is what happens for everyone who does not accept any inflow from heaven by acknowledging the divine being and by living a life of faith. People may judge for themselves what they would be like if this were their nature, if they were allowed to behave with no fear of the law or fear for their lives, without any outward restraints, threats to their reputation or to their rank, their profit, and the pleasures that attend them. However, the Lord controls their madness so that it does not transgress the bounds of usefulness, for there is some use for every such individual. Good spirits see in them what evil is and what its nature is, and what people are like if they are not led by the Lord. Openly evil individuals also serve to gather people of similar evil and separate them from good people, to remove from evil people the true and good elements that they presented and feigned outwardly, and to lead them into the evils of their life and the falsities of their malice, and thus prepare them for hell. This is because people do not get into hell until they are immersed in their malice and in the falsities that stem from it, because no one is allowed to have a divided mind, to think and say one thing and intend something else. Every evil person there must think what is false out of malice, and talk out of that malicious falsity there, both from intent and therefore from his or her own love and pleasure and gratification. This is how they behaved in the world, when they were thinking in their spirit. That is, when they were thinking within themselves, from their deeper affection. This is because intent is the essential person, not thought except as it is derived from intent, and volition is the essential nature or character of the human being. So being remanded to our own intentions is being remanded to our own nature or character and to our own life as well, since it is through life that we acquire our nature. After death, we retain the nature we had gained by our life in the world, which for evil people can no longer be changed for the better by the path of thought or of understanding what is true. Since evil spirits plunge into all kinds of evils when they are in this second state, it is normal for them to be punished often and severely. There are many kinds of punishments in the world of spirits, and there is no respect for rank, for whether someone was a king or a servant in the world. Every evil brings its own punishment with it. They are united. So whoever is involved in something evil is involved in the punishment of the evil as well. Still, no one suffers any punishment for evil things done in the world, only for current evil deeds. It boils down to the same thing, though, and makes no difference whether you say that we suffer punishments because of our evil deeds in the world, or that we suffer punishments because of our evil deeds in the other life. Because after death, we all return to our life, which means that we are involved in the same kinds of evil. The reason they are punished is that fear of punishment is the only means of taming their evils in that state. Encouragement does not work anymore, or teaching or fear of the law or fear for their reputation, because they are acting from their nature, which cannot be compelled or broken by anything but punishments. Good spirits are never punished, though, even though they have done bad things in the world. This is because their evils do not come back. I have also been granted a knowledge that their evils are of a different kind or nature. They do not stem from any deliberate resistance to what is true, and they are not from any evil heart except the one they acquired by heredity from their parents, which blind pleasure drove them into when they were involved in outward concerns separated from inner ones. Every individual comes to the community where her or his spirit was in the world. Each of us, as to spirit, is actually united to some community, either heavenly or hellish, evil people to hellish communities, and good people to heavenly ones. Spirits are brought there gradually and ultimately get in. When evil spirits are in the state of their deeper concerns, they gradually turn toward their own communities, and before this state has been brought to a close, they face them directly. When the state is completed, then the evil spirits plunge themselves into a hell where there are people of like mind. The actual community where their spirits were in the world is shown to them too, while they are in the state of their outer concerns, so that they know from this that they were in hell during their physical life. But still, they were not in the same state as the people who are in hell itself. Rather, they were in a state like that of people in the world of spirits. I will explain later what this state is like compared to that of people in hell. The separation of evil spirits from good spirits takes place in this second state, since in the first state they were all together. The reason is that as long as spirits are focused on their outward concerns, it is like the situation in the world. Evil people, together with good ones, and good ones with evil ones. It is different when people have been brought into their inner natures and are left to their own nature or intentions. There are various means used for this separation of good people from evil ones. Often it is by their being led around to the communities they had been in touch with through their good thoughts and affections during the first state. This brings them to communities they had misled by outward appearance into believing that they were not evil. Often they are led around in a large circuit, and their intrinsic quality is displayed to good spirits everywhere. The good spirits turn away as soon as they see them, and in the same way that the good spirits turn away, The evil spirits who are being led around turn away, too, facing the hellish community that is their destination.